Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of The Monsters Den. Although tonight we should probably be flexing our muscles because we're talking about comic book adaptations. You know, come on, Craig. Yeah, let's do it.
Comic book nerds don't have muscles, Pete.
Not all of them do, right? So it's all about comic book adaptations today. We're doing our favorite, our least favorite, and one we'd always like to see that we haven't seen as of yet. So let me introduce the crew. Dan Brown is in the house. Jamie Laszlo's here. The King is here. Chris Allo and Craig Kaminsky. What's happening, everybody? How you doing? We're
What's
deviating a
going
little
on,
bit from
everybody?
our normal stuff tonight, but we enjoy these films as well. There's lots of different stuff that we like. So, like I said, we've all picked out our favorite comic book adaptation, and we picked out one we don't like and one we'd love to see. So, basically, and we just kind of talked about this before we went on the air. These can be live action films or anime, and I'm assuming we could probably throw series in as well if we wanted to, because there's been some good ones. So I don't know what everybody's picked. We haven't compared notes, so pretty much everything's up for grabs. But it's got to be based on a comic at some point, a series or something like that by many of the different comic publishers that are out there. So it could be independent, Marvel, DC, whatever. So, Mr. Kaminsky, I will have you commence this evening here.
Okay, thank you. So for my choice of a good comic book movie that I really enjoyed, I chose 2005's Sin City. It was directed by Robert Rodriguez and Frank Miller. Frank Miller wrote and did the comic books or graphic novels that the movie had, that the stories within the movie were based on. What I really enjoyed about the movie is that I had absolutely zero idea of what the graphic novels were about. None. So when I saw this for the first time, I went in completely fresh. And a lot of times I think that's favorable, that you don't need to know everything about these stories or about where they take place or what have you to add to your enjoyment of it. I mean, for example, my years ago when my wife and I went to see Iron Man, I mean, she had absolutely no idea who Iron Man was or anything, but she enjoyed the movie based on, you know, the action and the characters, and Robert Downey Jr. was charismatic and everything, and so she enjoyed the movie. Same thing with me in Sin City. There's three stories and then one story that bookends basically the whole movie. And stars galore. It really has a wonderful cast for 2005. I mean, uh, my favorite of the three stories is the one that's called The Hard Goodbye, which stars Mickey Rourke is the main character in it, playing a guy named Marv, and he's almost unrecognizable with the makeup and prosthetics that he's wearing, but with the zippy dialogue and bloody action, even though it's black and white, which is pretty cool, with a few occasional color uh, parts put in just quickly, like someone's shoes or the yellow in a person's skin or and whatnot. It's just a really fun story of violent revenge and everything, with Mickey Rourke doing the voiceover and dialogue that he has with all these other characters. There's a fantastic nude scene of Carla Gugino in it, which I didn't remember seeing coming, where it was like all of a sudden, I think she turns around and she's topless, and it's like, oh yes, that's fantastic. But that story also features Rutger Hauer and Elijah Wood in a sequence where you really didn't expect to see him in that, with fighting and kicking ass and everything. Just a lot of fun. The other stories having actors, Benicio del Toro and Clive Owen, Bruce Willis, Michael Madsen, Michael Clark Duncan, Rutger Hauer. I mean, it's just has a great cast and is a lot of fun. I never saw the sequel, and the sequel didn't do very well, to my understanding, and
Awful.
probably because it's never a good idea to wait 9 years before you make your sequel.
Although Eva Green is great in the sequel, but the movie is terrible.
Yeah. But the first Sin City, lots of fun and highly recommended. So check it out if you haven't already, and especially you don't need to know any kind of the backstory with any of the graphic novels. So just sit back, enjoy, and have a lot of fun with it. Sin City.
That's great.
Yeah, I like it too. Jamie.
I went with one of the ones that I love a lot, because there's a lot out there. I didn't want to go with Marvel or really DC or anything. So I went with The Crow. Love me some Crow. I've seen it a million times. When it came out, it was a hit. But I feel like us generation, Pete, are you a Generation X? Are you right on the cusp? Okay.
Yep.
I feel like us Generation Xers made it a hit. It was like our movie in 1994. There were other big hits like Jurassic Park came out the year before, and True Lies came out in 94, but everyone was going to see those movies. Family was going to see Speed and whatever. But this one, Speed was like Facebook. Everybody's doing that. The Crow was like our TikTok, for Generation X. Your mom isn't on TikTok. Your mom wasn't going to go see The Crow. So it was kind of special to us. You were cool if you had the soundtrack. I mean, there's a few soundtracks every decade that kind of defines that decade. 80s, you had Footloose, Top Gun, 70s, Saturday Night Fever, 90s, I'd say Singles, and The Crow. You got like Pantera, everything from Pantera to The Cure, 9 Inch Nails, Stone Temple Pilots, I'm not big on, but that song's okay on here. But you're really cool if you had The Crow, and you're cool if you went to go see The Crow. Some of my favorite lines, it's not Shakespeare, but I love these lines. The one bad guy when he's scared of shit, scared shitless. I feel like a little worm on a big fucking hook. It's just so hilarious. And when the cop pulls his gun on the Crow and he goes, "Move and you're dead," and he says, "And I say I'm dead and I move." It's just simple shit like that. It just works on it. And the bad guy, Top Dollar, he's one-dimensional, and his name sounds like a dollar store franchise. I'm going down to Top Dollar to go get some toilet paper. You need anything? It's a stupid name, but it all works. Brandon Lee, his death, I wish he wouldn't have died. I think he would have been a megastar. I would have loved to see what else he did. Saying that, him dying on the set sure added a little mystery, more mystery to this movie, mysticism to the movie, didn't it? So they're remaking it. I say they should remake it every 30 years for every generation and a half. Make it that generation's Crow. This one was ours. It had, the rock star Crow. It had our music on it. Make a soundtrack for the new one. Put this generation's, whatever, Generation Y, whichever one's in their 20s right now. Make it their music. Make the Crow, closer to them. Maybe you can be gender neutral. Maybe you can have a peanut allergy. I don't know what these kids have these days, but just make it for them. And another thing, my sister, I had to live with my sister in 95. I don't recommend ever doing that. But she had a Crow.
Well, maybe I'd like your sister.
What's that?
I said, maybe I'd like your sister.
Okay, for about 5 minutes. Then you'd say I had enough. I had to live with her. Living with your sister's like you deal with all the bullshit of living with a woman without, any of the good stuff because it's your fucking sister. So she had a Crow poster, and when we moved out, I took the Crow poster. And then when she would visit me wherever I was, Virginia or whatever, she would take the Crow poster. And then I would visit her, and then I'd take the Crow poster. For 30 years, this thing jumped back and forth. Well, I would like to say that it's been around the block a few times, and it doesn't look that great anymore. But I got the fucking Crow poster now.
Wow, the much traveled
That and match.
At least it's not like the gold watch in Pulp Fiction, you know. So
Right.
at least-
Yeah, she could have kept it.
Oh man, too funny.
I've never seen this. I admit I've never seen The Crow.
Wow.
Wow.
And is the sequel any good?
No.
What's it called?
They're
City of
awful.
Angels?
No.
All of them are awful.
They're-
It's all
Oh,
shit except the original.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely getting the 4K of that.
Yeah, I just ordered the steel. I didn't rewatch it for this episode because I got the 4K coming in a week, and that's what I want to watch. I don't want to watch
For
my
sure.
Blu-ray and then.
And was that? Sorry for asking. Was that an independent comic or was it?
Yes, and when
Yeah.
you watch it, you feel like you're watching something from an independent comic. It didn't in '94. It didn't feel like DC or anything. It felt different.
It's kind of got that feel like when you watch Spawn for the first time, right? It's
It was an independent black and white comic.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it's written by James O'Barr, who was a weird fucking dude. I remember meeting him at Chiller Theater right when The Crow was released, and he was a strange cat. Like he wouldn't look you in the eye if you were talking to him. He would look away. And talented guy, but which ironically, he wrote the comic dealing with the death of his girlfriend in real life.
Oh.
Mm.
I will say the first time I ever had edibles, this was playing in '95. Woo-hoo, it sounded good.
Nice.
All right, Dan.
Okay, well, if you think in my world, if you think of two people, let's say in the '80s that are pivotal to the change of the landscape of comic books, one would be Frank Miller with The Dark Knight, and of course his things in Daredevil, and of course Sin City later on. But Dark Knight really changed the face of the comic industry. The second one has to be Alan Moore, and my favorite comic and adaptation of pretty much almost everything is The Watchmen. If anybody is familiar with the Watchmen comic, it has a very strange and long history. It's based on the characters. It's an alternate universe in which the characters that Alan Moore are writing about are based on expired or purchased comic characters from Charleston Comics in the '60s. For example, the Peacemaker, the Question, and so forth, and other Blue Beetle. And they were going to make a comic adaptation, but they were afraid that Alan Moore says, look, people are going to die here. They wanted nothing to have the fact of losing these characters to death. So he basically created characters that are based on the characters from these expired comic books. And the whole story is about basically the disillusionment of superheroes, of pop culture, the '60s, the '70s, and '80s, how superheroes they're not super. They just started as some kind of a fluke. Somebody with a cape and solve some crimes and this and that. And in reality, it starts having things in the '40s with the Minutemen, of which one character crosses over named the Comedian. The Minutemen are your typical '40s, like Justice Society of America comic characters, and then all of a sudden, as time goes on, they get older. Some become alcoholics. One is actually killed in a bank robbery. One of them is basically nothing more than I think she was a stripper, or she was quite a floozy in her time. Then what happens is all of a sudden there's only one character that comes out of this, is the Comedian. The Comedian is a character who starts pretty much like a Bucky character, but a sadistic Bucky from Captain America, who joins him at like 16 years old. Aside from just being a psychopath who works for the government under the CIA as an operative and assassin, who's been involved with many things throughout history. He's the only one that goes through the whole thing, and he is murdered in the present day. Now, the Watchmen, over a period of time, these characters, they have become disingratiated with society by society. They look at them as outlaws and villains. So they're like samurai in the 1860s, wandering aimlessly. They all have kind of broken down and survived and kind of adapted, except one character in particular, who, in my opinion, is the most frightening character of all in a superhero film. That is Rorschach, who is basically a homicidal justice getter. Now, the story goes on. They're being murdered one at a time, and you have to get to the bottom of this mystery. I'm not going to go into it, but it's really worthwhile. It is just so dark. It is so depressing, but it really is reality. What happens when you hang up the cape? It's very much what happens when you hang up your cleats or your football helmet or your wrestling gear. What do? You become nothing. I mean, not really nothing, but you're become a marketable figure and whatever it may be. But the film, what I love the film about the film is it pretty much copies the comic book bit by bit, frame by frame, even using frame caps or from the comic itself to actually set up a shot. They do make a major faux pas in the end of the story where they change this whole thing that's going to save the world, and it really kind of shoots itself in the foot. But I have to give it kudos across the board. The acting, I think I'm so convinced that what do you call it? Negan, Thomas, no, damn it. Who plays Negan? I just forgot his name.
Oh, from Poughkeepsie. What the hell's his name?
Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Dean Morgan plays the comedian. I'm convinced that actually his portrayal of the comedian was the inspiration for them to hire him, at least look at him seriously for Negan.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
On The Walking Dead. A number of other actors that all the actors that are in this film. And there's only one superhero in the whole film, and that is Dr. Manhattan, who happens to be a byproduct of, and he talk about superhero, he is the uber god. He is the Thanos of Earth. He can do whatever he wants. He's almost become a god. And one of the more shocking castings in this film, which really broke out, is Jackie Earle Haley, who started out as in the Bad News Bears and such. Of course, he was involved with an atrocious Nightmare on Elm Street remake, I believe, playing Freddy Krueger. Yep. But for the most part, he plays Rorschach. He is frightening. It's a worthwhile read the book before you actually actually see the film. I mean, I have it in this, the hardcover edition, which you can get for under $40. You could get the whole series of comics relatively inexpensively. It's just not one of these comics that have really got a huge in value. But wonderful read, changed the art, changed the world of comics as we see them today.
You guys watch The Boys?
Yeah.
I saw the first two.
Sometimes that reminds me of The Watchmen a little bit here.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's a lot of things would have changed the comic industry if it wasn't for Alan Moore and in particular Frank Miller.
It's funny because, the whole film is like scene by scene, line by line, exactly like the comic story, except for the ending. But really, the ending, I don't think would have worked anywhere else outside of the comic. I don't think they could have filmed that ending the way it happens in the comic. It's just too. I'm not going to spoil it.
I was always bummed when they took out the giant monster. I'm like, what the fuck, man?
I don't know if it would have made any sense in the film.
I just wanted to see the giant monster.
I know. I get it.
Is the television version that they did on HBO, is that much different than the movie?
Continuation, sort of. Yeah.
I think there's 3 cuts, right? I have the 4K, and I think it has the 3 cuts on there.
On the Watchmen?
Yeah, because there's
they did a series on
theatrical cut.
HBO.
There's an extended cut, and then there's an extra extended cut, which is the extended cut recut with the animated. What's it called? The Black Sails.
Yes.
That's cut into it.
That's the Ultimate Edition.
Yeah. That's.
Yeah, and that's one thing that they did also, made it right on target with the comic. And during the story, there's this young black kid who sits next to a newsstand, and they kind of break up the story at points where he's reading panels of obviously it could have been an EC comic from the 50s, or like those really over the top unrated comics from the 50s. But no, really, really, really well done.
Greg, they did do an HBO series which took place later on.
Oh,
I didn't even finish it. I didn't find it very interesting at all.
It's a prequel. It's a prequel sequel. They fucked with the mythology a little bit, because Alan Moore has disowned this book. Alan Moore has disowned everything that Hollywood's done. Most of his stories is based on his hatred of the comic industry. He hates hero worship. That's why all of his characters are miscreants. They're crazies. But the point being is that Dave Gibbons, his partner in the original book, he still retains the rights. And then he went to HBO. I read an interesting article, not to take too much time, but Alan Moore, in which when they were making the TV series, some big executive at DC sent him like a Dr. Manhattan barbecue apron to wear in front of thing, and like letters saying, "Hey, thanks a lot," and this and that, and apparently he just like sent the thing back and said, "Never contact me again."
Again.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah, he's a bitter dude, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another strange cat doing comics.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Yes, he looks like Abby Faria out of like Count of Monte Cristo. I mean, or Gandalf. He has long hair. He's not. He's just out there. And it's,
Yeah.
he's lost so much control. He doesn't own the characters. He's lost control of all the stuff, and he's more for the artistic integrity of the original book. Whereas Stephen King, when they make adaptations and they're horrifying, they go to him, "Well, what do you think of the adaptation?" He looks at his bookcase and goes, "Looks the same to me." So it's
He doesn't care.
yeah.
All right, Chris.
All right. My pick, I had to grab my glasses. I'm like, wow, this is older than I thought. From 2013, it's animated film, Justice League, The Flashpoint Paradox.
Oh yeah.
Based on the 2011 DC series Flashpoint. And this thing is super violent. And it's crazy, man. If you don't know the story, real brief, a huge chunk of this was used for the 2023 Flash movie, which I liked. I didn't like it as much as Flashpoint. This is a humongous story that involves the entire DC universe. Basically, the Flash uses his speed and the Speed Force thing and goes back in time to save his mother from being murdered. But when he does that, it's the whole butterfly effect. The entire DC universe is therefore changed. And before you know it, Wonder Woman is fucking Aquaman secretly behind Mera's back. And the Amazonians and the Atlanteans are at war. And Wonder Woman comes in one night and chops off Mera's head. And, there's nuclear bombs everywhere. And it's the apocalypse. And it's fucking insane. But it's also quite touching. Every time I watch it, when I get to the end, I don't want to talk about the end, but I tear up. Man, I cannot get through this movie without fucking, The Crow and then this movie are like the only two comic book movies that I can't seem to get through without tearing up. But it's awesome. It's a lot of fun. I remember when I saw The Flash last year with my buddy Sean, he was bummed that it wasn't more like Flashpoint Paradox. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? That movie would cost like, $1 billion with literally a cast of thousands. It is the DC universe, at war. And it's pretty crazy, but it's certainly worth checking out. I think it's on HBO Max if you don't want to buy the disc. I would definitely recommend it, Craig. It's fun. And that's my movie I like.
Yeah, that's one of the great DC animated films.
Yeah, they really got that one, changed quite a bit from the comic, but they really got it.
Yeah.
Got it well.
I would argue that the DC animated films and series are better than their movies.
Oh, yeah. I completely agree. Completely.
And whereas Marvel could never make a animated film to save their life that was really any good. And
the only one I did like was the what was it, Hulk versus? It was like two shorts. It was like Hulk versus Thor, which was okay, and Hulk versus Wolverine.
Yeah.
Oh, and you know what, the other Hulk one? What was it? World War Hulk?
Red Hulk or whatever. Yeah.
That was pretty. Planet Hulk. Yeah, that was pretty good. But for the most part, yeah, they were pretty bad. The Marvel.
They were CGI too, right? If I was not mistaken, were they CGI?
Some of them were. The two that we just mentioned, yeah, those are traditional animation.
Okay.
But yeah, those ones that say DC Dark or whatever that are on HBO Max, those are all super violent.
Yeah, I mean this one is nuts. I mean, people getting stabbed and shot, and like I said, Wonder Woman chops off Mera's head, and it's it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, the Justice League Dark ones are really
yeah, those are both good too. I've seen both of those a couple times, particularly the second one, which is kind of similar to this in that it's like the whole DC universe at war.
I forget, it's the second one that's got pretty much John Constantine in the starring role.
Yeah, he's got a pretty big part. The first one is more
well, Batman's one of them.
Yeah, Batman's got a small part. The first one is a lot of the magical characters, Zatanna, Constantine, and then the second one has them, but brings in Batman in a bigger role, and Superman, and Wonder Woman, and some of the others.
Those are all a lot of fun. They did
Yeah.
a good job on those. All right, so for my first choice, there's so much to choose from, so many good ones, and I was having such a hard time picking. I said, well, what's the film, or in my instance, films? Sorry, guys, that I've just watched more than any others, and like when I watch them, I'm just kind of like spellbound by how amazing they are, and they're both produced by the Russo brothers, and I'm talking Infinity War and Endgame, the Avengers. To me, this just took what was such an epic series of comics that went, years, this whole war with Thanos and the Infinity Stones and all these characters. These films did such a great job of putting all that together. Although they have their issues as well. Like now, all these years later, when you go back and rewatch these and you revisit the comics, you realize it's like, man, how did they make this whole thing happen without the Silver Surfer, without Adam Warlock, without Mysterio? I mean, there's all these characters, the Fantastic Four, that was so much a part of the comic, but because of rights issues and all this other stuff, they kind of basically used what they had. And I still think they did a great job. Masterful special effects, a killer cast, so much action. Chris mentioned before, just like the emotion and things. I mean, how about like the end of like Infinity War, right? When the snap happens, right? It's just, you're like, what? It just, I remember like walking out of the theater of both of these, just thinking, holy shit, that was like one of the greatest movies I've ever seen in this genre. But yeah, they're both, I have to include them both together. I don't know which one I like more. They're both amazing. Maybe Infinity War is the better film. I don't know. They're both great. But yeah, Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame. That's my first pick.
Nice.
All right, so for a movie that we didn't a comic book movie that we didn't like, um, last week I watched for the first time a movie based on a character that I had a few comics of this character when I was little, and I always thought he was really cool, but damn, this movie was disappointing and bad, and that was Morbius from 2022. Um, I always thought Morbius was like a really cool character in the few a couple issues that I had.
Great
Uh,
character.
yeah, and the comics that I had, he was the living vampire, and he was pretty cool looking and everything. And then this movie, it's just I I can't really explain a whole lot of the plot because it's just kind of out there, and he Michael Morbius, played by Jared Leto, as like a blood disease, and he goes down to Costa Rica and somehow doesn't get eaten by all these bats, and but yet brings them back with him. And it's just he in the old inject yourself with the cure, and the cure is worse than the disease type thing. And but it was just kind of a mess. I mean, Matt Smith from the Doctor Who fame and from House of the Dragon plays the villain, but it's his best friend in the movie. He's the only one that kind of seems like he's having a good time with the character in a couple parts. I mean, he is sickly and everything, and then takes the cure, same thing that Morbius took, and is loving being a vampire. There's a couple scenes where he's like dancing and dressing and getting primped up, and where it looks like he's having as much fun as he possibly can with the junk that's prepared for him on the screenplay. But it was just kind of nonsensical, and I was dozing off like maybe about halfway through it and checking. It's like, well, how much is left? And it was a tough slog to get through. But worst of all was the bonus scene, the credit scene that they throw in at the end, where Michael Keaton as Vulture from the Spider-Man Homecoming movie shows up and says to him, "Well, I think we should make a team." And of course, I was sitting there, and I even said out loud, I was like, would that be this Sinister Six, but then it was like, well, wait, is Morbius a bad guy at the end of this movie? I don't know. And it was just kind of hell, let's just throw some shit at the wall and see if it sticks. I mean, it was just kind of a mess and just more disappointing because I always thought that the Morbius character was pretty cool. And the movie infamously bombed and had all these internet memes of it's Morbin time and all kinds of shit like that. And they even tried to re-release the movie a second time, thinking that these internet memes meant that it was positive word of mouth, and it wasn't. They
Nope.
were laughing at the movie, not with it, and even you're not even supposed to be laughing with it. But it was just a mess, and another and what seems to be pretty often of the Sony Marvel movies that just kind of fly way off the target, and that you wish that they would be cool, but they're just not. So yeah, my thumbs down is for Morbius.
Sony's
They're
trying
all
so hard to make this Spider-Verse thing and get to a Sinister Six movie, and it's just like
It's not happening.
no. They need to take that Craven the Hunter movie and Batgirl it. Just Batgirl it. Be done. Nobody.
Craven the Hunter is a great character.
Yeah, but
Oh,
the movie's
sure.
gonna suck.
Yeah.
Yeah, Venom's a great character too, and they seem to have screwed that up.
Carnage?
Much,
How do you
yeah,
fuck that up?
yeah.
Yeah, you need to just let Marvel do this in their own time because they already have enough Spider-Man villains where you could easily do a Sinister Six, but Sony, forget it, let Marvel do it and they'll do it right. Or we hope anyway.
We hope.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Jamie, you're next.
All right, I went with a very bad one. I went with 1997 Steel with Shaquille O'Neal. And this thing is not on Blu-ray. And when I rented it, it was in standard definition. So you cannot even watch this in high def. And I saw it years ago just for shit and giggles. And I was like, oh my God, I got to watch it again. This is going to be a long 90 minutes. But you know what? It's actually so bad. It's kind of funny. But when this came out, it was 1997, only 4 years after the death of Superman comics, when Steel first came out. So I was like, is this, when I first heard about it, I'm like, they're going to make a Steel? This could be like the comic book movie for comic book geeks. Who the fuck knows Steel but comic book readers 4 years after the fact, right? I mean, they could start with the death of Superman. You can get the Cyborg Superman. You could get the Superboy. You could get what the hell's his name? Eradicator. You could have God, they could make like 4 movies at once. They're all battling to be super. No, none of that happens. What you get is this stupid little movie. It's its own thing. They make a Superman joke here, and they show a tattoo of Superman on Shaq that he always had. But they make a lame Batcave joke. But other than that, this is not really in the DC universe whatsoever. And it didn't do well because comic book fans saw the previews and said, what the fuck did they do to Steel? Non-comic book fans said, who the fuck is Steel? and it all just looked bad in the previews. And the suit, all right, so the suit looks like a cross between, this is the best I can do. So you get a cool Knight, all right? That looks cool. You kind of got that going. But then you throw in a little, what the hell is his name? Dumb Donald from fucking Fat Albert, all right? And you combine this, and you get this.
Perfect.
I'm not saying Shaq is dumb or anything, because I don't think he is. But they make him look dumb. They make him look dumb as fuck. And I was watching it, and I felt embarrassed for him. Because Shaq is still with us, and he has to know that this is an existence out there. And he's living with this, and I felt so bad for him.
He's doing okay. He's doing like all
He's
those
doing okay, but
all those
you know
car
he-
insurance commercials. He's doing
Yeah,
fine.
I know.
Yeah.
But still, that's still got to bother a person. Because he really needed a director. And who directed this? Kenneth Johnson, coming off of the great Mighty Ducks Part 3 movie. He did not know how to direct these people, their facial expressions. Like, he just said, act surprise. One take, done, in the can, move on. There's a scene, such a stupid suit too. It's magnetic, and there's a scene where all the bad guys' weapons come flying and they stick literally to his ass. He gets shot literally in the dick in one scene, and they pan up, and Shaq is doing this. It's so awful. It's terrible. Richard Roundtree is a little bit of a bright spot, but he makes the Shaft joke, but it turns out being like a gay sex innuendo more than a Shaft joke. He's like, what I really like about it is the Shaft. Do you? Oh, oh God. You know what? I recommend watching it. I do. I had to rent it and spend $4 on it. It's worth $4 to laugh at it. The Annabeth Gish is in it, and she's in the Mike Flanagan horror movies or series these days. She's in a wheelchair. And she's got these rocket launchers, $2 rocket launchers on the side, and then she's got like a jetpack in the back, and she's supposed to be going fast, but she's not going fast with the jetpack going. It's just terrible. It made 870K in its first week and dropped 78% in its second week.
Ouch.
That's tied with another superhero movie for the worst drop off in its second week. You know what it's tied with?
Madam Web.
I was gonna say
probably.
Madam Web or the Marvels.
The Marvels, yes, tied with the Marvels. So the poor Marvels. So yeah, I almost recommend seeing it. And what they should do, you know what? Have yourself a double feature. Get Kazam, that came out a year before, with Shaq as a genie, which I've never seen, but you know is bad. And then watch this and have like a 3-hour laugh-a-thon. That's my recommendation.
A regular Shack Attack.
Have a Shack Attack, yes.
But
I
even
can
that
think of a
comic
lot of
book character
things.
is, even the Steel comic book character. I mean, I remember, I had the graphic novels of the Death of Superman, and I was like, this character's lame on paper. How could you make a movie out of it? It's like, isn't he
Yeah.
like a regular guy? He's not like he's not a superhero. He's just he built the suit, right?
So, yeah,
I
to
mean,
give him like
it's-
Superman like powers. It's been 30 years since I looked at that comic.
Oof. No good. No good.
Have you guys seen it?
No.
No, I never bothered.
After a half an hour of Morbius, so I'm pretty much in the dark with all this stuff.
It's hilarious.
he must have been licensing his likeness to anything at that time, because then he also had the video game Shaq Fu, which was on Genesis and and everything. So it's like, man, he was still playing at the time too. So
I was gonna say, I went to that ZoloCon toy convention in Pennsylvania last year, and if you were a VIP, you got like a goodie bag, and every goodie bag had an action figure in it. And mine had a Shaq with a basketball action figure, which I want to throw out, but I just keep moving it around in the garage. It's a toy, so I can't throw it out, but
I have a feeling that's going to show up at the toy fair.
in Newburgh at the Newburgh Toy Show.
Oh, they make jokes about him in the movie too, how he's not good at basketball. How they
That's
can't
funny.
keep it free.
Oh man. Dan, your shitter.
Oh, my shitter is good. We're gonna touch back to somebody else I mentioned earlier. We're gonna be touching on a lot of things even what Jamie had said. As far as the worst film I've ever seen, to get a little background on it, there was a character by the name of the Spirit.
Oh, sure.
Now, the Spirit is one of these actually iconic characters, the most unknown iconic character in comic book history. Most people do not know what he is or the comic itself, but it's had like over a 70-year history. It started as a comic strip. He's basically a guy who has been, he wakes up in a cemetery. Doesn't know how he got there. He knows he was shot. He wasn't dead. He's not a zombie. He's not a warlock. He's not a witch. And he ends up becoming like a crime solver. He looks kind of like a film noir Green Hornet who has, at one point in his storyline, his office is in an abandoned mausoleum in the cemetery they found him in. So he gets himself in all kinds of things, but he's very tongue-in-cheek, and he was written by a fellow by the name of Will Eisner. Will Eisner is another one of these iconic, actually a cartoonist, and then wrote into the comic books. And even there's a Will Eisner Spirit Award is out there for comic artists. He's very inspirational to a lot of younger artists in the comic world. The Spirit comic started as a comic strip, went to in the 60s, 50s, and the 70s, it went to Warren Publications, which was the magazine I brought up that made famous monsters of Filmland. He eventually ended up on some of the independent labels like Kitchen Sink Press and so forth. Now, why am I giving this big buildup with this? Someone who was greatly inspired by the Spirit and wanted so badly to do it was none other than Frank Miller. If anybody could do this film, I can, we say. That being said, this film is sandwiched between Sin City and The Dame to Kill For. What happens probably, this is my theory, but I believe that since he did get a director's credit on the first Sin City, Robert Rodriguez was directing. I really believe that Frank Miller was there as a consultant. He respected his work. How should we do this properly? Well, somebody must have dangled a check and they said, you want to do the Spirit? He came, he jumped on it. And let me tell you something. Think of, in my opinion, think of Sin City and A Dame to Kill For, but as if it were put together by maybe possibly Ed Wood. Okay, it's not bad special effects, but they don't know where they want to go with the Sin City stark black and white. Do they want to go with the pale washed out look? Okay, do they want this? Now, what they do is they just, excuse the term, fuck with the mythos. I hate when comics fuck with the mythos of a character. Number one, perfect example, okay, is in the original Batman. Okay, Jack Nicholson is actually quite good as the Joker in some respects. But in the original Batman, the Joker killed his parents. You see him, Jack Nicholson's character, good. That totally destroys the mythos. It doesn't exist. Same thing happened here with the Spirit. The Spirit, he's not in the movie version. He's invulnerable. He can't be killed. He's immortal. They shoot the shit, and going after him is a character by the name of the Octopus, played by Samuel L. Jackson. Honestly, other than showing up midway through the film dressed up in an outfit that looks like Leona Helmsley, the hotel crazy woman that owned the hotel with a pillbox hat and a leopard coat, is in black cross-dressing. Okay, he is just he's playing Samuel L. Jackson, but buffered down, to the point where I felt like at one point he's going to look at the screen and go, what's in your wallet? It was just so lame. On top of that, you got Louis Lombardi. If anybody knows who this actor is, he was Big Pussy's handler, FBI handler in the first season. Short, this. Now, he plays something that they're cloning, and there's like hundreds of them. They look like Curly Howards. And he's stupid. And the whole thing of this story is that Samuel L. Jackson, the Octopus, is trying to get the secret of why the Spirit is now immortal, which was not part of his original character. They do it on green screen. Nobody seems to know what the fuck they're doing there. The only thing redeeming in the whole film is Scarlett Johansson and Eva Longoria dressed a la Sin City, whatever, playing the perfect sexy femme fatale. But other than that, it's horrible. I didn't want to go into the storyline. This is a film I saw, didn't see it in the theaters. The Avengers I saw in the theaters and walked out. I saw this in TV. I think I shut it off, or on VHS. So I attempted to watch it again to make sure it really was I being too harsh on this thing. No, not at all. Had it been in the theaters, I would have walked out on it as well. And on top of that, I think I'm starting to rethink I may have to gain an appreciation for the big screen adaptation of the Avengers with Ralph Fiennes and everybody else there. But that's the horrible.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I bought that on DVD. It was like, oof, this is not good. Never need to watch that again.
My vast collection. I never even wanted to own it.
Yeah, I just bought it because I was like, oh, the Spirit, cool. But I had no idea what it was all about. I brought it home, watched it, and I was like, it's pretty bad. Put it on the shelf, and
it shows up at the Newburgh Toy Show.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's long gone. I don't think
that'll be in somebody's gift. That'll be in somebody's
gift bag. Here we go.
You guys there at the next one. I think I've got it.
There you go.
Get rid of.
Chris, your shitter.
All right, my shitter. I watched this 24 or 5 years ago, and I thought it completely sucked. So I talked about it with Craig the other day, and I'm like, well, I can't just say it sucked. I guess I got to watch it again, like Jamie was talking. And man, yeah, this movie fucking sucks. I was an enormous fan of the comic, the underground comic from David Quinn and Tim Vigil, two New Yorkers, Faust, Love of the Damned. It was the most graphic black and white comic I have ever read, full of sex and gore and genitalia, and it's fucking insane. And Brian Yuzna did a film adaptation which came out in the year 2000, and it's fucking garbage. It is Faust, Love of the Damned. One guy referred to it recently as it's like The Crow, but shitty and on a $5 budget. And I think that pretty much sums it up. Visually, the Faust character, if you don't know, it's kind of like if you mashed Batman and Wolverine together, complete with fierce, indestructible metal claws that he can retract. And there's this whole thing with the main villains named M, for short for Mephistopheles, and there's this whole satanic thing, and there's tons of sex and nudity in the comic. There's a decent amount of nudity and sex and violence in the movie, but they still completely fucked it up. The costume looks like shit, like Jamie was mentioning in his movie. I mean, every time the main character moves, his horns jiggle. Every time he pulls the fucking the Wolverine claws out, they jiggle. I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake. And this guy, Mark Frost, the main actor, fuck you, Mark. Listen, I hope this movie killed your career, because I watched this movie by myself and I probably said out loud, oh God, about 6 times, because the movie is 100 minutes long, but for about 20 minutes, this guy, Mark, has his eyes wide open and his mouth, he's like catching flies. I'm like, even in his fucking death scene, I'm like, dude, if you're this shitty of an actor, just close your eyes. But I'm also blaming Brian Yuzna, because I think he's a great producer, but other than Return of the Living Dead 3, I think most of his movies that he directed sucked. So this is garbage. Yeah. I don't care how much you like the comic like me. I'd say I'd watch it again in 25 years, but I'll be dead. So that's Faust, Love of the Damned.
All right. I've never read the comic or seen the film.
Oh,
You'd like the comic, Pete. It is it's fucking wild. Yeah.
It sounds it.
See, why are you a mirror image?
Because I got a Prezi going
He's
here.
doing press.
Oh, okay.
Just ready for my shitter. Is the 2005 film The Man Thing.
That's pretty bad.
Never have I been more disappointed in my life at a movie based on something or a character that I absolutely adore. I am a huge Man-Thing fan. I love Marvel's kind of horror characters, and the Man-Thing is basically Marvel's answer to Swamp Thing. They kind of debuted almost at the same time. Marvel was a little bit late there, but I remember thinking, finally, they did a Man-Thing film. And then I was like, but it like debuted on the Sci-Fi Channel, which was weird. And I remember hearing rumblings early on that the reason why it debuted on the Sci-Fi Channel because it was so bad they didn't want to release it in the theaters. It got such bad like pre-release press. I was like, all right, well, whatever. It's got to be fairly good, right? So I remember running out and renting it and watching it, and like my heart sank. It was so bad. They totally didn't, other than the fact that this creature is in the Florida Everglades swamp, there is nothing else even resembling what this story or the character is all about. They basically treat him as just like some homicidal, terrorizing swamp creature, and the whole movie they just want to kill him. There's no backstory about him as Ted Sallis becoming this creature, that he was a scientist. There's no real fear burns at the touch of the Man-Thing. There's no sympathetic aspect to it. He's just this murderous swamp creature, and that's it. And the actors and plot of the film is just non-existent. The actors are terrible. Dialogue is terrible. They kill him at the end, and that's it. And I'm like, that's what you're going to do to my beloved Man-Thing? And not until Marvel had Man-Thing show up in the Werewolf by Night film or short film, like what, year and a half, 2 years ago, was I like, finally, we have the real Man-Thing showing up in a Marvel movie or whatnot. And hopefully we see him again in the not too distant future. But I would say anybody who has not seen this 2005 film, don't bother. It's just bloody awful. And he doesn't even look good either. He's just like all these like branches and shit. The only thing that's really similar is he's got the red eyes and he's got like that kind of like little root trunk thing, but everything else just looks ridiculous. It's just, it was probably made, I think it was made for like just a couple $1 million, and it only made like $1 million. But total disaster of film. Steer clear.
Yeah, I remember that being really bad.
Oh, it's just, yeah. And I wanted to like love it. It's like one of those films like, oh, finally, but it's no good. Absolutely no good. Anyway, Craig, the film you'd like to see that we've never got.
Yeah, one of the character, a Marvel character that I've always liked, and he's been represented on screen at least a couple of times that I'm aware of, but they screwed it up, I think, both times, and that's Sabertooth from Marvel. He was portrayed by I believe Tyler Mane in the old X-Men movies in the early 2000s, none of which I think are very good. And then Liev Schreiber played him in one of the Wolverine movies, and fine actor, but I think he's miscast as Victor Creed and as Sabretooth. But the what I would like to see adapted is this. This was a 4-issue limited series called Sabretooth Death Hunt. This came out in '94. And what would be cool about this is it's more of a John Wick type story than it is superheroes and superpowers and people flying around and shooting rays and everything. It's in a nutshell, it's a 4-issue limited series, so it's not a huge story. Victor Creed has a live-in, like his girlfriend or a Girl Friday type thing. Her name is Birdie. She kind of dimes him out, and he is taken prisoner by a group called a person who you don't see his face called the Tribune, and they soup him up, sort of, and then they also, kind of like in Escape from New York, plant a bomb inside of him so that if he doesn't perform his mission, that he'll blow up. His mission is to go and kill Mystique, the X-Men or mutant shape-shifting character, and if he doesn't do it in a certain amount of time, he'll blow up. So he eventually he finds her, and of course, right before he's ready to kill her, she changes her form into someone that he's known from his past, from years before, and you find out that her and Sabretooth had a child together, and they're both mutants, but their child happens to be a regular human. It turns out that his son is the one who hired his father to go kill his mother, and he was also hoping to kill his father at the same time because he grew up to hate all mutants. Some of the other aspects in this is Birdie, his telepath girlfriend. She helps. It's described in the book how she gives him like a fix me. He always says, and she does something to help clear his fogged memories of his time as an agent, where he doesn't remember, has his memories have been taken away, and there's flashbacks to when he was a little boy and how he was abused badly by his parents, chained up in a basement like a dog, and they would pull his teeth out and they would come back, because they thought he was, like some sort of something from the devil. It's one of those. He would have grown up differently if it's a nature versus nurture type environment, instead of becoming the way that he did. At the end of the story, Graydon Creed, his son, kills Birdie, and he says, well, why did you do that? And he says, because I want you to hurt, and I want I want you to suffer. And at what happens Victor Creed eventually then goes to the X-Men mansion and basically asks for Charles Xavier to be his psychotherapist for a bit. That's not in this, but that happened in the comics. But it's just a really cool shoot 'em up, violent series that doesn't go very long. And I think even with people who would have superhero fatigue, there's not a whole lot in it. Wolverine is in the third part of this, but you could probably write him out of it, and you wouldn't even need to have an additional superhero in it. You would probably, and maybe you could even change mystique to just have it be to be a different woman. But I think it would be a really cool thing to adapt, maybe even as just a 4-part series of sorts, to have to give Sabertooth a better representation on screen. So that's my pick. So this one here. I don't know if you have this, Pete, or if
I
you've
don't
read this.
actually. No, I don't.
Or if it's too new. It's from '94.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot of newer Marvel stuff like that. I have anything that's new, I have it's more DC than Marvel. So cool. Jamie.
As far as Marvel, I'd like to see a big epic Silver Surfer movie.
100%.
I feel like this is a whole universe that someone could tap into. This is a well no one's drinking from. And that is the Hanna-Barbera superheroes. Space Ghost.
Oh yeah.
Herculoids. I got a Herculoids glass, pint glass. There are so many heroes that they can make a universe out of the Hanna-Barbera superheroes. And you can make these quirky too. They don't have to be 100% serious. You can even make them animated. I don't care. You got Space Ghost, Blue Falcon and Dynamite, The Impossibles, Shazam, the Mighty Mightor, Birdman, Frankenstein Jr., the Herculoids, and the Galaxy Trio, which debuted in 1967 before Guardians of the Galaxy. So Hanna-Barbera was kind of on top of that before Marvel. You can do to ground the whole universe. You could have like Johnny Quest as like your Indiana Jones type movie series out there. I think it would be great, and I've been crying for this for like 10 years. And if you say, well, Laszlo, that's not really comic book, is it? Well, no, they were in the comic books as well. And look, they got Moby Dick there. I think you can scratch out Moby Dick. We don't need a Moby Dick movie, but with a talking whale and shit. But I think it would just be great. Now, we're a little bit past the era of starting new universes. I think people are getting a little burned out on that. So I think this should have been done maybe about 10 years ago if they were going to do it. But I think it could have been loads of fun. And I think Craig would agree with me. If you're going to do that, this ain't Hanna-Barbera, but give the world a Thundarr the Barbarian movie. I mean, the world is kind of shitty. It's only going to get shittier. Make it a little less shittier by giving us a Thundarr the Barbarian movie. We're headed to the apocalypse anyways. So just give it to us in movie form. So, yeah, that's my idea. Hanna-Barbera.
100% behind all of those.
I'm sold.
So much fun. Yeah.
The Herculoids. Couldn't you imagine a Herculoids movie?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
great.
Oh my God.
I mean, you know, and it's the whole family thing. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love Space Ghost, although that was a great character. It's like, yeah.
And with Thundarr, and with those villains, I mean, just if you just used Gemini, I think you could definitely do that with all the CGI and everything of how he looks one way, then turns his head, and it turns into an evil face, and yeah.
What cartoon had the two characters look like bowling pins? They were like
That's the Herculoids.
Herculoids.
Geek and Gleek.
Right?
Was that their name?
Gleep and Gloop.
Something like that.
Gloop and Gleep.
Yep.
Okay, I've heard it.
Yeah, that's what Igu and I forget the.
Zoc was the dragon, right? Zoc, wasn't that it?
Yeah, those cartoons were very steeped in drugs. It was good.
It's the 60s, man. Dan, you know. We don't have to tell you. You can tell us.
Why do you think I can remember this? Remember
Let's see. If you could remember it all, you weren't there.
that? It's all me.
It's amazing we don't have a Johnny Quest movie.
I know, right?
I love what the Venture Brothers did with him, though.
Venture Brothers was great.
That's like the best. That's
Dan, what adaptation would you like to see?
well, we're going to go back to my favorite writer, Alan Moore. I mean, I'd like to see, simply put, I'd like to see them do justice to the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I'd like to see him do justice to V for Vendetta. Okay, but one book that's never been touched upon was only a 15-story arc by Alan Moore in the 1980s called Miracleman. Miracleman was based on a British comic from the 1950s called Marvelman. And there became a lot of legal problems with Captain Marvel from the 40s and then Marvelman in England. But the comic struggled on for about 7 or 8 years. It was a family-oriented comic. They were kind of like, if you want to call it, they were like the they were like a G-rated family, you know, like you watch those cartoons where the families are all superheroes, those animated films. But anyhow, by the 1980s, it was up in the air. An American publicist bought it for Eclipse Comics and hired Alan Moore to write a story. Alan Moore grew up in the 50s and knew of Marvel Man comics. But instead of taking that family-oriented thing, once again, he takes his disillusionment with reality of life, and they start the series out with a fellow who's just this downtrodden guy. He drives a truck, he's a chain smoker, he doesn't care anymore, and so forth. Well, one day he is walking by, he sees a sign by an atomic power plant, and he sees the reflection in a mirror, and he says, Kimota? And all of a sudden he turns like a Shazam into this superhero. Basically, he was a superhero in the 50s. They put him under some kind of hypnosis so he would never remember what he was. And the only way to turn into this guy was saying Kimoto. The whole story is about him. It's just dealing with it, being a superhero again. There's another arch nemesis out there who's very similar to him, goes by the simple name of Nasty Man. It is extremely dark. He's being pursued and trying to be murdered by the professor that birthed him or created him. And you find out his whole life is a lie, almost like in a Truman Show type of thing, but it's in the world of superheroes. It's really hard to get into it. They did it for 15 issues. Alan Moore bowed out, says, I'm done. But he handed over the reins to Neil Gaiman, who did around 6 or 7 issues for it. But the character is still out there. It is owned now by Warner Brothers. They're going to do anything with it, I don't know, or DC, I think, has it. But it's a very dark story, very befitting of Alan Moore. You know, if you made films the way they were supposed to make, I mean, in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, I can't believe who did what to what, but I think it's the Invisible, no, the Jekyll and Hyde, I think, actually like sodomizes the Invisible Man. That's how dark Alan Moore is in his stories.
But if you can't see him, how can you tell who you're raping?
Well, that's the whole creepy thing about it. You know, it's just when he does the comic. I can't remember when they rate the comic or do the illustrations. It's just weird. But just the whole fact of thinking, it's like, my God, you know, he's being sodomized. It's either vice versa. Is he being sodomized by the Invisible Man, or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is sodomizing the Invisible Man? Who knows? It doesn't matter. It's just kind of fucked up. And you don't see that generally on the newsstands. But yeah, Alan Moore, once again, Miracleman. And one last bit I'd like to say about the Spirit. The Spirit was such a popular series, the director slated to make a Spirit movie in 1974, as a follow-up to The Exorcist, was William Friedkin. And it never came to pass. They eventually made a TV movie of it, but William Friedkin was hot on the trot to do a Spirit movie.
Interesting.
Never to be.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so bear with me a second while I get my Prezi thing going here. So there were 3 that came to mind for me that I couldn't really decide which one to pick. So I'm just going to quickly mention all 3 of them. So, and these are all characters. They're all pretty different from each other. So the first is, and we actually got an animated film based on this character, but I always thought he would be great for a regular live action film. And that's the Red Hood from DC, villain of Batman. It's actually Jason Todd. So Jason Todd, who was once Robin, was killed by the Joker, and then he comes back to life as the Red Hood. And if you've never read Under the Red Hood, this is a fantastic storyline that not only brings the Red Hood into the world of Batman, but the Joker's in here. You got Superman's in here, and Nighthawk, and all sorts of other villains and characters. Black Mask is in here as well. Really, really great storyline. Whether they could cover it all in one film, I don't know. They did it in the animated. I don't know. Chris, did you ever see that?
Well, which one?
Under the Red Hood.
Oh yeah, I got that. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's really good. So that's my first one. And my second one is a old character created in the late 1930s. Another one of those original pulp characters, kind of like the Spirit, the Shadow, and Doc Savage. And that is the Avenger. So the Avenger is this crime fighter character, like I said, originally a pulp character. The pulp magazines back in the day, they made comics based on this character and whatnot, but never did anything on film. Very cool character. It's about this guy who's he's a very important businessman, and his family, his wife and child, they wound up getting murdered and killed in a plane by these bad guys. And he is so traumatized by the death of his family that his face becomes paralyzed, and his skin and basically his flesh becomes like malleable. So he goes and he learns all these fighting techniques and weaponry and whatnot, and he has this ability now to move his face around to take on the appearance of basically anybody. So he becomes the master of disguises, but that's really his face that he can kind of move around. Very, very cool character. If you like the old Doc Savage books or the old Spirit books or the Shadow books and whatnot, very similar type thing. They're very formulaic. He has this team of helpers that he works with, kind of like Doc Savage with his team, but really good, like late 30s, early 40s crime fighting stuff, like one of the early kind of superheroes. So that's my next one. And last but not least is a very cool DC character that I think actually would make a great film star. And that is, come on, where you go?
Drum roll.
Come on. Here we go. Hopefully it comes up. Come on. All right, this is driving me crazy now. Well, the character is Mr. Miracle. All right, I'll get this going here. So Mr. Miracle, for those who are not familiar, was actually created by Jack Kirby, who was with Marvel for many years, and then he actually went over to DC and he created this whole universe of which Mr. Miracle is one. Why is this not adding? Anyway, Mr. Miracle is very cool. He's basically an escape artist, and he becomes a superhero, and he's got ties to a lot of the other characters in Kirby's DC universe, including the big baddie. I'm totally drawn a blank on his name now. Darkseid, yes. He's in that whole universe. The Forever Peoples is another part of all this. Anyway, he's a very cool character, and he can basically escape from anything. He's got this awesome yellow and red costume, and the whole series is basically him in all these situations where they always trap him and figured they're gonna, do away with him, and he always escapes from anything. So he's kind of like the comic book version of Harry Houdini, and a very, very cool character. Then, unfortunately, after Kirby left to go back to Marvel, DC kind of fumbled with this character for years later, and he was never quite the same, but very, very cool. And I think having like an escape artist like this, who's got these really cool powers that he can just basically get out of any situation, and he's got ties to all this other stuff in the Darkseid universe, I think is pretty cool. But alas, we'll probably never see something like that. So yeah, those are that's my last pick for today.
All right. And I just thought of the after credits scene for the Silver Surfer movie. In walks Rom, the Space Knight. Oh,
wow.
I don't know if Marvel has rights to him. Probably not. Maybe Parker Brothers.
No, that's a Parker Brothers thing.
Right,
yeah.
Parker Brothers.
All those Heralds of Galactus, I think, would be really cool to see. On screen, Fire Lord and Terrax and all that. I think they'd be really cool to see.
I think that if because obviously we're going to see the Silver Surfer and Galactus probably in a Fantastic Four movie, but if I were Marvel, I would start with the kind of origin story of the Silver Surfer first. So let's get the whole Norrin Rad story with him and the girlfriend or the wife, whatever, on their planet, and have him make the pact with Galactus.
Because it's a long story.
It is a long story because
it's not just getting bit by a spider. It's a whole thing.
You have to feel the sympathy for this character because he's this long suffering guy, right? He's got this whole backstory. So you have to know all that first, I think. Then they have to do his whole becoming the Herald of Galactus and how lonely that life is. And then you have to introduce the Fantastic Four and then have them interact. Then I don't think just throwing him out there is really the thing to do, but they're not asking me, so I don't know what they're going to do. But we'll see. We'll see. I think the Silver Surfer movie would be fantastic because I think he's a great character.
Especially with today's CGI and special effects.
Oh yeah. I think honestly, he was the best thing of that second Fantastic Four movie. you know, at least they got him right. I mean, Galactus was a abomination in that film, but still, you know, we'll see. I still have hopes that they'll do the Silver Surfer right, but we'll see.
Drop the ball on Namor.
Yeah, kind of, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, there you have it, everybody. So in the comments below, list your favorite, least favorite, and the comic book adaptation we've never seen or have yet to see that you'd really like to. And we'll be checking that out. And visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube all together all the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already and click on that notification bell so you get alerted of all of our content as it posts. And please do hit the like button before you leave. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks on the Monsters Den. Until then, for Davey Gallagher, Chris Allo, Jamie Laszlo, Dan Brown, and Craig Kaminsky, and Pete Pardo. See you real soon. Take care, everybody.